Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some hidden gems. What we will be discussing here are books that I don't mention very often that I still think are excellent and I recommend, as well as I don't see talked about on BookTube very much. That doesn't mean no one has talked about them, and it doesn't mean that nobody is championing them. They're just not some of the titles that you see that I think you probably see touted all the time on this platform, including by me. But they're all still worth the read, and if you're looking for more recommendations, hopefully there will be something on this list for you. I have 10 hidden gems that you may not have heard of or don't hear about very much that I still recommend, and then I have 5 honorable mentions, ones that I don't think are as popular here on BookTube, but I still probably talk about too much, but I'm just gonna rapid fire mention those two because I like them a lot. Also, one of my rules for this video is if a book made it on my top 15 list of 2022, it can't be on this list, even if it, I think, could be considered a hidden gem, just because I just made those lists and I don't want to be really repetitive just a few weeks later. But just because they're not on this list doesn't mean they don't deserve that attention. You should still I'll link that video in case you haven't seen it. There's some good books on there. Anyway, we're gonna start off this video of hidden gems with The Lies of Locke Lamora. I'm just kidding. Please don't leave. I don't mean it. I'm not gonna talk about it again. We're starting out this list with a very recent read. I read this book in December. It's a novella and it's haunting me, which is good because it is a horror. It's called Mapping the Interior. This follows a 12-year-old native boy, his mom, and his brother. Shortly after his father passed away and they move off the reservation, he starts seeing visions or apparitions of his dad. His dad starts visiting him posthumously. It's only 100 pages and it packs so much into these 100 pages. Grief, bullying, family, loyalty, identity, expectations for yourself and for your family. How far will you go? A lot of things. It tackles a lot of things, actually. Like I said, there's a lot packed into this little guy. It is one of those unnerving, get under your skin, slow burn kind of horrors. Again, only 100 pages, so you don't have to be too patient with it. But it also has some very shocking and disturbing scenes. Sometimes what's the most disturbing isn't even what's the most shocking. It's the thing that couples the shocking event that makes you go, but why was that there too? And the ending was very disturbing too. I would liken this to if you are a fan of, I almost feel like it's not so much stream of consciousness, but stuff like the posthumous memoirs of Brás, Cubas, or what's that one book that everybody likes? Catcher in the Rye, where it's discusses very bleak, horrible, disturbing things in just a very stark, blunt way, as far as the perspective of the protagonist goes. But then also I would liken, without getting into spoilers, I would say if you're a fan of Pet Sematary, which I am, you might like this too. Different reasons. This is really good. It's only 100 pages. You should read it. Since I just mentioned it and it's on the list, I should have started with this one, I guess. Speaking of the posthumous memoirs of Brás, Cubas, this was excellent. This was on my favorites of the year in 2021. So this follows a man who died and wrote his memoir posthumously after death. So this is him writing from the grave. And because he can't think of a single soul worthy of having this book dedicated to, he dedicates it to the worms gnawing on his dead flesh. It's, like I said, I mean, I just mentioned kind of the very stark discussion of brutal things. Brás, Cubas is not a likable protagonist, and he doesn't try to make himself likable in his memoir. He just speaks very bluntly about the world and himself. He's writing this memoir, and he'll have commentary where he'll be telling a story and then he'll cut himself off and say, you know what, this is stupid. I'm growing tired of myself. I'm done talking about this now, and then the chapter will end. Or like he'll write a chapter and then at the end of the chapter tell you to rip this chapter out and put it in a different place in the book because it'll fit better there. Or he'll insult the reader. He'll tell you like, I'm getting tired of writing my story. I'm getting tired of hearing my own voice. I'm getting tired of everything. But you know what I'm the most tired of, dear reader? You. You're insufferable. It's like so funny. But with that humor, with that amazing, I mean, I laughed my whole way through this. With all that, it's also a very strong social commentary. And this is a Brazilian classic, and in my copy at least, there's an appendix at the end that I highly recommend reading because there's a lot of Brazilian cultural and historical context that, if you can read up on, only adds more impact to the cultural critique and social critique within this classic. Strongly recommend. I really loved this book. Next up is a literary fiction. It's called Still Alice. I think she's a neuroscientist. Let me just double check. Yeah, the author is a PhD in neuroscience, and I think all of her books are about neurological conditions. So anyway, Still Alice has had an adaptation, so it's not like it's an unknown book, but I just don't hear anybody talking about it on this platform. So I want to talk about it because I really loved this book. This follows a woman named Alice who is diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and we begin the story with that diagnosis and with her kind of reckoning with it, processing it, her husband and children and their reactions. She is a linguistics professor. I think she's very prolific in whatever life she has, and losing her ability to give these public speeches and to be able to work the way she does and continue her career is obviously, it's a lot for her to take in, and we follow her as her condition progresses. I just really appreciated it because dementia runs in my family, and you know, this is something that I have lived among for a long time. And this, as well as And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, these are two books that just really made me feel like my family was understood. And also this book in particular helped me to kind of process this disease a little bit differently from a more internal perspective instead of from the perspective of someone who's assisting a family member. I kind of got to see it from the perspective of someone who's living in it, which was beneficial to me. And I think even if it's not something that you live as closely with as that, I think that it is still a book very much worth reading. Next up, a little bit lighter option is Half a Soul. No, I got that book from the library and I've returned it. It's not here. Stop looking for it. Half a Soul is a Victorian fairy tale. It follows a girl who encounters a fairy, a member of the Fae, and he tries to steal her soul, but he's only half successful, so she now has half a soul. This means that she doesn't experience every emotion, and it also means that she doesn't always pick up on social cues. Anyway, she has half a soul. And it's very Jane Austen-y in the setting, the Regency setting. Did I say Victorian earlier? Now I'm saying Regency. I don't know what I'm talking about. It's a classical setting, and so you have the balls, and you have the societal expectations, and you have, like, you know, the way that people communicate without actually saying what they want you to say, but you're expected to understand. And of course, with her only having half a soul, she's not exactly, she's not good at it. So you get a lot of humor in that she's just very blunt, and a lot of times she'll say something, and then she'll say, oh, I've just made it awkward, huh? Whoops. But then in her quest to get the other half of her soul back, she ends up meeting friends along the way, having great adventures, and it was a very satisfying ending for her. I think it was light and fun and funny the entire way through, and I think that the climax and the falling action and where we all landed in the end probably couldn't have been more satisfying than it was. These sort of happy books typically aren't the kind of books that I choose. So you won't catch me talking about them very often at all. And yet, I do highly recommend this one because even to my cold dead heart, I loved it. Susanna Clarke is certainly not an unknown fantasy author, but I don't hear Dr. Strange and Mr. Norrell talked about a lot, and I'd like to give it a little bit of attention. I'll keep it brief, but think historical fantasy about two magicians who rise up and work together, and they have a dynamic like Sherlock and Watson. It's a very slow-paced book, and when I read it over a pretty decent stretch of time because of that slower pacing, though now I appreciate slower pacing far more than I did before, so I don't know if that would be my experience now. But it is a book that, despite having read it well over 2 years ago, I think, I still think about it. Maybe it's because one of my friends never stops talking about it, but I still think about it, and I still have there's so many scenes that are very vivid to me, character scenes, as well as, you know, when you get to the big climax of the story, it's pretty fantastic. But the dynamic between these two magicians is just, it's unbeatable, honestly. Like, it's that dynamic that you don't really get tired of reading when it's written well, and here it's written so well. Next up, I have A Silent Voice, which is a manga series, and it's one of the first manga series that I read start to finish. It's very short. I think it's only like 12 volumes or something like that. It's about this young deaf girl who starts going to this new school and is heavily bullied. And you have that beginning, and then you see them a bit older. And the story is very much one about bullying. It's about how that affects a person, not just in the now, but long term and devastatingly sometimes, as well as other characters that grow and learn and grow up, fix, do better. I think this is targeted at a younger audience, like a teen audience, which I would say is appropriate because it talks about this topic in very blunt ways, and it does it in a way that I think would really make teens and middle school kids think about this a lot harder, and does it in a way that also gives hope to if you've put yourself in a position of being the bully, of making you look at that real hard, but then also realizing that there is room for change. You can do better. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but I thought that this series was great. I have very mixed feelings about the ending, how it ended, but everything else I really, really loved about it. And I think that it is a series that I do plan to read with my kids when they get older and just kind of have those discussions about how much this kind of stuff affects people and why we are not gonna be those people, the ones that target others. Next up, if you'll indulge me for a minute, I'd like to talk to you about The Push. I know that most of you probably don't care about rock climbing, but I do. And there's this really great documentary called The Dawn Wall, and I watched it and it was amazing. And then I needed to read Tommy's book, so I did, and it was amazing. I would argue even better than the documentary, but I tend to always like the books, you know, the ones that give you more detail. Anyway, this is about this climber's life. It's about his trials, it's about his childhood, it's about the things that he had to overcome to become one of the best climbers in the world. It's about his journey on the Dawn Wall, but it's about so much more. It's about perseverance and love and marriage and passion and overcoming incredible odds, and I just really liked it. I won't talk about it any more than that because I know that you don't care as much as I do, but I care and I loved it. Next, we have some feel-good books. These, we have The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, the Horse, and Big Panda Tiny Dragon Book 1. I actually just read Big Panda Tiny Dragon Book 2, but it's upstairs and I forgot to bring it down here, so you get 2. I really just consider these books like a warm hug. They're so short. There's not much going on in them as far as, I'll show you. They're very short, they're very quick to get through, there's not a lot of text on page. Some of the stuff, it's mostly a collection of things to think about and things to chew on with a loose narrative thread to follow through, or to string it together. And I would say some of it's cheesy, some of it's obvious, some of it will make you think. And I really like these. I don't think that there's something, I don't know, extraordinary that'll change your life, but there's something that I enjoy, and I have started. I read this when a subscriber sent it to me, I believe at the beginning of 2021. This is the first book I read in 2022, and the other book upstairs was the last book I read in 2022. And I just like them. You can read through it in an hour. I just like them. And the final book on this list is a self-published space opera called Starnations. This is obviously set way in the future, where 5 nations in the stars fight for dominance, are in constant struggle with each other, and then a greater threat appears. It's a very political heavy space opera, as well as, I would call it, internal drama. There's a lot of relational drama among the wider political maneuvering and atrocities that are going on throughout this near 800-page book. Despite having so many threads going on and so much happening, I found it really easy to just keep reading. Oh, I forgot the honorable mentions. Is this long enough that I can do that? I'll do rapid fire. I'll make it super quick. Super fast rapid fire books that I don't see talked about too much on this platform, but I talk about plenty enough that you don't need me to mention them again. First of all, Daphne du Maurier. Everybody's read Rebecca. Everybody likes Rebecca, but do you know that she has books that are even better? My Cousin Rachel is probably the best book of hers that I've read, but also Jamaica Inn is excellent. I just watched someone's Worst Books of the Year video, and this made it on the list. It made me sad, but he also did a really good job tearing into it, so it was entertaining, so, you know, everybody wins. And my personal favorite of hers, that I don't necessarily recommend because I think that it's just a me problem, but Frenchman's Creek. It's incredible. Octavia E. Butler, an author that a lot of people have read and a lot of people recommend. One of her lesser known books, Wild Seed. I still don't even know how I feel about this book because it did a lot to me, but it also has stuck with me. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Octavia E. Butler is just that kind of author in general. But I think this is worth the read, even if it won't necessarily make it to your best of the year. It's incredibly written, and it's a really, really unique story. And then 2 books that are probably not worthy of even being honorable mentions because they're a little bit more known on BookTube. We have the Ember Blade and the Bone Shard Daughter. Think Lord of the Rings retelling with its own spin and its own style and a little bit modernized and so lovely. Think young girl wants to be the empress but can't because she's lost her memories. Father who creates these constructs, these Frankenstein creatures that he controls through bone shards, which are unwillingly taken essentially from the people, and they are harmed by the taking. She wants to learn to be the emperor, but she can't until she regains her memories, and then a whole bunch unravels, but that's just one perspective of 5, but it's probably the mainest main. It's just good, I just like it. I think I said 5 honorable mentions, but I only wrote down 4, so. I guess to give you a 5th honorable mention, I'll say Tomie. Junji Ito is an author that anybody who reads manga knows about, but Uzumaki is his most popular, and there's a reason for that. But Tomie, I think, is almost as good. It's about a woman who is brutally murdered, and then she comes back in many, many ways to kill many, many people in many, many ways, and it's how she's affecting the world and haunting and killing, and that's a bad description of it, but that's what I'm going with. Oh, the back says, murdered again and again. One girl always comes back for more. She keeps being killed, and she keeps returning the favor. Those are 10 books that I consider hidden gems. It doesn't mean they're never talked about, but I don't see them talked about nearly as much as maybe they deserve. Books that I think are still fantastic. I don't talk about enough. I don't see them talked about a lot, but I still think that they are excellent and well worth the read, as well as 5 honorable mentions because of who I am as a person. If you have read any of these and you want to discuss them further, or if you plan to pick any of these up, please let me know in the comments. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on this channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on the second channel, where you can keep up with what I'm reading week to week, as well as get dedicated spoiler-filled reviews for my favorite things that I read. I'll see you again soon. Bye.